White Hokkaido Achmentelman is last night what the school Entelman Nalit the Skeetchestn who Aquas cooking to Hapmkuluch. It's an honor here to do a presentation to you all. We are in our community of Skeetchestn, which is part of the Shuswap Nation here in South Central BC.
Okay, White Hokkaido. Greetings from Secwepemctsin. Just a little bit of background on this. The work here that we're doing on Secwepemctsin plant terminology within the context, as well as animal terminology, comes out of our work on at the intersection of Secwepemctsin language and ethnobiology in the last few years. But it particularly also comes out of us teaching the language to a new generation of adults, and often encountering, as people translate from English often into the indigenous language, Secwepemctsin, then out of that comes, well, how come we don't have a word for plant and we don't have a word for animal? And this addresses that, at least in the very short time span. There we go. So, really briefly, I'm just going to gloss over this one. We're in South Central Interior British Columbia in the Secwepemctsin Nation, and our language is Secwepemctsin. And we've done ethnobotanical work here, as some of you will know, for the last 3 or more decades. Some of it together with our friend and colleague Nancy Turner and numerous others. And we're also working in language restoration because Secwepemctsin, our language, has probably in the end no more than 50 speakers left. Also paying tribute to the elders who've supported our work in the last decades. Many of them have left us now. Next slide. And so botanical work here. Much of it has been done by Nancy Turner since she started out back in the 1970s, by Gary Palmer, linguist, the late Art Kuipers, Brian Compton and Dwight Gardner did some work on ethnobotany and also ethnozoology, and Ron and myself also since the 1980s, and of course for Ron, since he was a young child, has done ethnobotany by going out on the land. Next. So as I already mentioned, there are no generic lexical root terms at the kingdom rank for what would be animal and what would be plant in Secwepemctsin, and it's the situation is somewhat similar for many of the other 23 or so Salish languages. Next. We have generic terms for animal kinds, polytypic ones. So spute for bird, swout for fish, pepitsa for a snake, and there are some, I think they're in a sense made up terms to mischachen, the four-leggeds that people sometimes use in prayer and in talk to refer to animals. Sometimes the term meos, wild, to refer to the category of all wild animals, but it works a little bit different than the way you would have different genera and species in English or types. Okay, next. And the same thing works for plants. We have the word chirep for tree, kulakula, grass, sulansum being the whole category of flower, category of moss, mushroom, into which then plants are grouped. But as reflecting on this, when people really actually talk about plants, especially on the land, they rarely refer to the wider categories, but tend to name specifics. Next. Okay, and this it's a little bit small the way this shows. The important thing, though, is while we don't have some of these lexical categories, much of what goes on in plant and animal classification actually in Salish languages hinges on a grammatical category called lexical suffixes. And these are a way of compounding words and to add on to a lexical root a suffix that basically is a classifier that makes the lexical root a member of a certain category. And so the, actually, can we go to the next one here? This one we've already got, and this one we can skip over as well. And yeah, so I've just mentioned that most of the nomenclature is actually at the genus and species level, where people talk about very particular plants as well as animals. And now the next one. So this is the one that talks about lexical suffixes. So the one very important one is the suffix esp, or sometimes in unstressed syllabi, an unstressed syllable, and it is applied to a wide variety of plants that includes trees. It's applied to flowering plants, herbaceous plants, bushes, shrubs, and so forth. And when we tested this through with speakers a few years ago, it actually maps out very closely onto what is a vascular plant. So there's some examples there. Chqesp is Douglas fir. Elkesp is a kinnikinick plant, a small shrub. And Qatsuya elp is the word for yarrow, which literally means a chipmunk plant, because the leaves of yarrow reminded people of chipmunk tails, or the stripe on the chipmunk and its tail. Mushroom takes the lexical suffix qein, and actually the word for mushroom itself, smetqein, has the lexical root of something that very quickly, explosively grows. There's eshila for the category of shrubby bushes, and usa for anything that has like the berries on a bush. Next slide. And in addition to that, lexical suffixes describe various parts of plants. So upya for the above ground flowering part of herbaceous plants. We have itlip for the seed or pit. Oops, did we just lose it? And an interesting one actually is the fifth one on the list there, aka, literally something that describes a moldy type of coloring, white translucent kind of consistency. And it shows up in certain kinds of mushrooms. And actually, the way it describes them, my suspicion is that this may be something like a term for observed fungal networks. And then estlia for grass or reed-like, eka for plants with notable branches. Okay, next. And so, yeah, the conclusion is that in Secwepemctsin, like other Salish languages, the terminology, most importantly, is organized around lexical suffixes that categorize plants. And some of them are fairly similar to Western botanical categories, often based on like cultural use and salience of plants. So the work that we hope to carry on with this is with some students in the last few years. We've developed a fairly large database of Salish zoological terms to capture them in as many Salish languages as we can, including in Secwepemctsin, and also then doing continuing ethnozoological work with remaining fluent speakers and elders. And so this would actually then allow us to expand how the language and Salish languages at large categorize zoological terms and taxa. Thank you.